Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fair Chance Hiring Workshop presented by the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing Program, or SOMAH in short. Thank you so much for attending today. And hopefully you get to learn a bit about best practices with regards to fair chance hiring. Next slide, please. If you have the feeling or inclination to ask a question to one of our wonderful panelists or myself, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your webinar screen. You can chat to the panelists at any time with the chat button, or you can also raise your hand if you feel so courageous to ask that question out loud. We encourage all of these methods, and please, if you, for whatever reason, you don't want to ask this question in this platform, you can also email us at workforce@calsomah.org, and we can go ahead and get your questions to the relevant panelists, or we can answer your question ourselves. Next slide, please. All right, so a little preview of today's agenda. I'm going to go ahead and perform an introduction. My name is Walter Perez. I am a Workforce Development Program Manager on the SOMAH program administration. We have some wonderful guest speakers, and I'll give them their own individual shout outs and list some of their accolades. But just to show y'all who we have today, we have the wonderful Miss Wanda Rogers, who's the founder of the SoCal Pre-Apprenticeship Program. We have Dr. Mitchell Smith, Senior Technical Director, Training Director at the Young Community Developers. And we have Veena Gushahani, who is a Deputy Director of California Programs at Roots and Rebound. So we have some giants today presenting on a very crucial topic. Next slide, please. Before we dive into this incredibly fascinating topic, I wanted to introduce our team. We are the SOMAH Workforce Development Team. And Ingrid, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you if you want to go ahead and give us your name, your title, what you do for SOMAH, and what you're excited about today for.
Yeah, my name is Ingrid Murillo, and I'm the Senior Workforce Development Program Manager. I help connect trainees to contractors and help provide support to trainees. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Mina.
So Mina isn't unfortunately here right now, but I want to go ahead and introduce her. Mina Defee is the JTO audience lead. She leads all things job training organizations, and she was able to facilitate the introduction between me, Miss Wanda Rogers, and Dr. Mitchell Smith. So big shout out to her. She will be joining at some point during the webinar today, so she won't be a complete stranger today, and y'all can get to meet her a little bit. Again, I go by the name Walter Perez. I'm a Workforce Development Program Manager. I lead contractors and contractor questions with regards to workforce development. So if you're a contractor in this call and you have a question about some of the topics here today, or just some questions about the job training requirements, you can reach out to me at workforce@calsomah.org, and we can get you some help. Next slide, please. All right, so this is sort of the big question of the day, and sort of the topic surrounding the webinar today is, what is fair chance hiring and why is it important? So just to give you some context behind what inspires fair chance hiring and fair chance hiring practices, nearly 1 in 3 US adults have criminal records. That's approximately 70 million Americans. When these individuals attempt to re-enter the working world post-incarceration, they often face immense employment barriers. In fact, analysis shows that 4 million incarcerated people are unemployed at a rate of over 27%. That's higher than the total US unemployment rate in any historical period, including the Great Depression. This is a major issue, not only because of the human impact, but also because of the impact of the workforce. And that's actually why we're hosting this today. We are the Workforce Development Team for the SOMAH program, and we think that fair chance hiring practices can be adopted by our contractors. They can be learned about by our trainees, and job training organizations can implore them and encourage them so that we can have a healthier workforce working on these solar panels. Next slide, please. All right, without further ado, I can go ahead and shut up and introduce our special guest. Veena is the Deputy Director of Roots and Rebounds. She is an experienced litigator and thoughtful advocate. Immediately prior to this role, Veena served as a San Bernardino site director at Roots and Rebounds, where she was able to practice on alleviating the reentry issues facing clients of the time for Change Foundations. Prior to Roots and Rebounds, Veena gained invaluable litigation and management experience practicing in a variety of settings in California and Illinois. As a senior staff attorney at Disability Rights Legal Center, Vina represented individuals with disabilities in federal, state, and regulatory claims in her role with Disability Rights Legal Center. Prior to moving back to California, Vina served as a staff attorney at Legal Aid Chicago, one of the largest LLC-funded legal aid organizations in the country. Vina is an absolute rock star, and she's going to present a lot with regards to fair chance hiring, both for the employer and employee side. So Vina, please take it away, and we appreciate you for attending today.
Sure, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm just going to go over the basics of the why Root and Rebound does what it does, and then what the fair chance hiring law in California says. So next slide, please. So Root and Rebound, we are a nonprofit organization based with our home office in Oakland, California. Our mission is to support people navigating reentry and reduce the harms perpetuated by mass incarceration. We serve the whole state of California, and we also have a sister site in South Carolina. But our key programs are direct services. So we have a hotline available every Friday to anybody who has a California record. It's free. You can call in from 9 to 3 p.m. And do an intake, and we help you with your reentry needs. We also create public education materials, so guides and toolkits. They're all on our website, training such as these. And then we have a policy arm that works to change laws to better benefit those in reentry. So as I mentioned, we have a footprint throughout California, but we also have a sister site in South Carolina that's also doing reentry work. So, but in California, our headquarters is in Oakland. We do virtual and in-person clinics throughout the state. We just finished 4 clinics, 2 in Northern California and some tribal regions in the Central Valley in Tulare and Madera County. We work on impact litigation. So, claims that if we litigated would change the landscape for all Californians. And then we have a partnership in Los Angeles with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. So the how and the why. So it was mentioned earlier that 1/3 of Americans has a record, and that since the 1978, California's prison population has grown over 600%. So as you can see, some of the information is a little dated now. It's hard to get current, information on those incarcerated, but it's still true that United States has the highest incarceration rate of all of several, what they refer to as first world countries. And you can see how dramatically the incarceration rate has raised since 1925, and a lot of that has to do with the war on drugs, in quotation marks, and just the change in how our country thought about incarceration, and so many people are paying the price for those changes. They serve what's called, a double or a triple sentence, because once they're released, they have to navigate reentry and face 48,000 reentry legal barriers. So that includes federal, state, and local laws. So an example, if you're convicted of a state crime, you could face the federal barrier where you may not be able to travel, or you may not be able to own a firearm. You could face the state barrier of the same. And then you could face local barriers, local laws, which prohibit you from residing in certain places, or being banned from certain apartment complexes, things like that. So why is fair chance hiring important? Employment is the single most important factor in determining whether people end up, the recidivism rate, so whether they end up back in prison or jail. Based on a study in 2014, the US economy lost $87 billion in GDP by not hiring workers with conviction histories. And every year, 60,000 Californians return home, and thousands will cycle in and out of county jail. California just closed finally the DJJ facilities, the juvenile facilities, and those Juveniles are going back to county jail, and then, we have to figure out reentry for them as well. So what is fair chance hiring and how does it impact those in reentry? Fair chance hiring is also known as ban the box. At an initial level, at the basis, it means that most employers cannot ask about someone's conviction history on the first application. Next slide, please. And that's where the term ban the box came from. So I'll mostly talk about fair chance hiring in California today, but I did want to state at the front that both under federal and state laws, employers cannot do blanket bans. So they cannot have something on your application that says, felons need not apply, or no one with a conviction history will be hired. The EEOC, which is a federal government agency, has guidance on the consideration of arrests and convictions. And it said that, a blanket ban may violate Title VII, which is the discrimination, the major federal law on discrimination. So this is just a graphic that shows the most common types of employment in the state of California. It's a little hard to read, but I really just included it for the graphic. You can see different industries and what's covered, just where people are in different industries. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see that not all of those industries are covered by fair chance hiring laws. And that's because one of the major exemptions is if the industry works with vulnerable populations, then they don't have to comply, or they have they're exempt from the law I'm about to speak about. But you'll see what is included: computer system design, the service industry, construction, manufacturing, retail. So a lot of major industries are included, but I think the big one over here, which was education, is not included. Next slide, please. So just an overview. Fair Chance Hiring Act, or also known as Ban the Box, that went into effect with January 1st, 2018. It applies to most employers with 5 or more employees. So, for example, like I said, those who work with vulnerable populations are exempt from parts of this law. It's designed to protect people with conviction histories from discrimination in the hiring process, so that they're considered as an applicant, being judged on their qualifications before an employer considers their conviction history. And it's enforced by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but if there was a violation of the law, it would be enforced by the California Department, that agency, before it went to court. Next slide, please. So there's 3 parts to the law: the ban the box part, the part that says what you can't consider and when; the fair chance process, so what happens if an employer does consider the conviction history at the appropriate time, and then what they can consider and what actions can be taken; and then what things are completely off limits. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the first part is ban the box. So employers under this law cannot ask about your conviction history on any initial application. So as example, I go in, or I fill out an application online, whatever those questions are, whatever the initial application, if it's the part where I give you my resume or I fill out a questionnaire, I cannot be asked about my conviction history. I don't have to disclose it. If the initial part of the application is an interview, I do that interview. An employer should not be asking me about it. I don't have to disclose it. It's only after a conditional offer is made, then the employer can run a background check or ask about an application's conviction history. So, and then, so this is just part one, ban the box. So I've mentioned the exceptions before. And the exceptions would be employers that are allowed to ask during the initial consideration. So again, if you're working with vulnerable populations, so one of the reasons education is exempt is because if teachers, nurses, doctors, they, schools, hospitals, they can run background checks as part of the initial application because they're working with vulnerable population. Law enforcement, security guards, attorneys working with the federal defender's office or the court systems, they can do a background check before. Or if you're working with a bank, they can do a background check before. Yeah, so those are the exceptions to running the ban the box first part. Okay, next slide, please. So then if an employer runs the background check at the first part, after the first part, what actually comes up? What can they consider? They can consider convictions within the past 7 years. What shouldn't show up on a background check? Convictions older than 7 years, arrests that didn't lead to a conviction, convictions that have been judicially dismissed or expunged or record cleaned. That's all if you do a commercial background check. Some jobs will go ahead and do the DOJ live scan or, like a federal background check. That will show everything. But if it's a standard employer background check, it'll only have convictions within the past 7 years. So part two is then the fair chance process. Okay, so let's say employer employee does the initial application, employer finds that the employee is a qualified candidate, but they want to run a background check. They make the initial offer. Employee doesn't have to consent to that background check, but employee then can waive their initial offer if they don't. That's up to the employer. So, but if they consent to the background check and a background check comes back and there are convictions, the employer then must make an individualized assessment of whether an applicant's job conviction or conviction history has a direct and adverse relationship with the duties. The employer must give notice that the applicant has the right to respond, and then we'll go over what happens with that right to respond in the next couple of slides. But one thing to note, one thing that was happening, particularly in the early pandemic, was people were starting their jobs and employers were delaying the background check until later. But at any point in time, when the employer runs the background check, these protections still apply. So if employee has been working for 2 weeks, employer then runs the background check and then wants to rescind the offer, they still have to go through this process. So what is the individual assessment? It's nature, time, nature. So if employer wants to consider the conviction history, they have to decide, consider the nature of the offense, the time that's passed since the offense, and the nature of the job duty. So oftentimes you have employers who have, are using this as pretext. If somebody has a conviction of petty theft, which is usually a misdemeanor, sometimes employers will say, oh, well, that's the employee has a history of stealing, I can't hire them in my retail. But it doesn't start there. How much time has passed since the petty theft? And does it actually impact the person's job duties? So one example where you could say it does is like, let's say employee had a recent conviction of, cyber crimes or cyber stealing, and they're applying for a computer-oriented, job. That might make a little bit more sense. But the you have to consider all these factors before an employer rescinds a job offer. And one thing I like about this graphic on the slide is that it shows the timeline, right? So you have application, interview, job offer, background check. After the background check is when you do the individualized assessment, not before. And you see that the background check comes way after the interview process and the initial, and then the job offer. Next slide, please. So then if the employer goes ahead and decides to withdraw the job offer, they have to withdraw it in writing, and they must send a pre-adverse action notice in writing, which means, hey, we said you were qualified for this job. We've gotten your job. We've gotten your background. We no longer think we can employ you, but you have 5 days to respond before we take that adverse action. And so it must say that they relied on the background check, that the person has, the potential employee has 5 days to respond, or they have 10 days if they're actually disputing the accuracy of the background check. So, for example, I was assisting somebody who was applying for a job at Walmart. They got the background check back. The background check was correct, but we disputed that the nature of the offense related to the job duties. And so we, and within 5 days, I helped this person compile, letters of recommendation, certificates of rehabilitation, those things to put together in a package and respond in writing within the 5 days. If I also helped somebody else who the background check was inaccurate, it said that my conviction was a felony when in fact it was a misdemeanor, which, it maybe may not seem like such a big deal, but it is a big deal. And I think people want to make sure that they're accurately being judged on the facts. And so in that situation, you have 10 days to respond, but you must let the employer know, hey, I'm taking the 10 days because this inaccuracy is incorrect, or this background check is incorrect. So let's say you're in phase 2 and you want to respond to the employer. So we at Root and Rebound encourage potential employees to keep this information handy. So not like they're spending 5 days compiling this and trying to get letters of recommendation. No, work on it ahead of time so that if you get a pre-adverse action letter, you can put this together quickly and send it off to the employer. So documents showing rehabilitation, educational diplomas, certificates, letters of support, whether that's from community members or teachers or anybody who can vouch for your, employment skills. I often encourage folks to write a letter that they can then amend depending on the employer that already states, their history of rehabilitation, why they should not be considered, why they should no longer be penalized for their conviction, and any other mitigating evidence. So to the potential employees out there, work on getting these things together so that they're at the ready if you need them. And then, like I mentioned, what to do if the background check is inaccurate information. Notify the employer that that it's incorrect and you're working on getting it corrected. And then you got to notify the background check company and provide proof of the correction if possible. So part 3, what's off limits information? So in general, an employer can never ask about or consider arrests that did not lead to a conviction unless it's an open case. So for example, candidate just got arrested, 2 months ago, they haven't been charged yet, it hasn't been dismissed yet, that can be considered. But if something 10 years ago, they were arrested, it never led to anything, it can't be considered. Court-ordered diversion programs. So those are usually related to like drug convictions, convictions that have been sealed or dismissed. So root and rebound, we do a lot of record cleaning or expungement. If something is expunged or cleaned, it cannot be considered. One note that we make is that some folks apply for a certificate of rehabilitation. That does not apply. That can be part of mitigating evidence. But if a person gets a certificate of rehabilitation, it means that their record actually hasn't been expunged, but that the governor or the state of California is recognizing that they've been rehabilitated. So it goes in that as mitigating evidence, but that an employer can still consider that conviction. And then minor marijuana related offenses over 2 years old can no longer be considered as part of the job process. So this is the slide on legal compliance. So if an employer is found to, or a potential employee finds that an employer violated their rights as part of the process, you complain to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. They open up a investigation and they take it from there. If it's a federal thing, just discrimination, you could go to the EEOC. They similarly do an investigation and it goes from there. Some places like the County of Los Angeles, they have their own fair chance hiring law. They might take it over from there as well. So in hiring, best practices include language in job postings that encourage people to apply if they have conviction histories. There are job forums that are geared towards individuals with records. You can establish pipelines with agencies that proactively support people with conviction histories. You could choose a reliable background check company and create, pre-adverse action notices that explain all of the rights, so you don't get into trouble with potential violations, because fines can be hefty if the DFVH finds that you did in fact violate the law. And then if you are an employee, what should you do? You should make sure you have everything in writing. If you're applying online and you don't get a receipt of your application, take a screenshot. If you see that somebody's asking at the initial application about your record, take a screenshot, take a picture. Always get a copy of the background check that the company runs. It's your right to have it and it's helpful. And again, save everything that you get, create a record. Not only, in case you want to file, but just so you can improve, the process down the line. And then during the interview, if somebody asks about an arrest or conviction history before they're supposed to, you can just say that, it's your understanding that you don't have to answer that right now. And you can even ask back, would a conviction history disqualify me? It's an uncomfortable situation, and there's no easy way to navigate it. So I tell most people just to go with your gut. But know that if you open the door, if you proactively disclose something when they haven't asked about it, you've kind of opened the door, and then a lot of these protections go away. So we have a new employment resources for women in Tulare and Madera County. We have employment coaches. So if anybody out here is looking for a job in Tulare or Madera County, I just wanted to plug our employment resources. These are the requirements for employment coaching. You've got to identify as a female or live in Tulare or Madera, and we can provide you with in-depth job support. On our next slide will be the contact information for those folks, so we can go to that one. Oh, actually, this is more about our services, but we can go to the next slide. I feel like I'm taking up too much time. So yes, if you're interested in either of these services, Yvette or Victoria can help you, and I can always provide this information at the end as well. We did create a fair chance hiring toolkit for employers. It's $11 on our website. It's also free on our website if you just want to get the PDF version, but if you want a hard copy, it's $11, including shipping. And this is just a graphic of all of our resources that are available, also available on our website. Next slide. That's it for me. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you, and I'm always happy to answer questions and speak more.
Thank you so much, Vina. That was so educational. I feel like contractors, employees, and potential employees and JTOs have learned a lot from you. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you. Moving on to our next panelist, Dr. Mitchell Smith. Dr. Mitchell Smith is a lifelong educator whose career started over 30 years ago. Born and raised in New York City, Dr. Smith understands the challenges in that face urban areas and gives insight to teaching methodologies that must be in place for students of all ages to succeed. Dr. Smith has led numerous workshops and training seminars in areas of workforce education, self-awareness, and gang violence prevention. Currently, he is a senior technical training director for Young Community Developers, a nonprofit organization inspiring and empowering residents in Southeast San Francisco through job readiness training and employment counseling, where he manages curriculum and instructions for their staff and customers. Dr. Mitchell Smith, thank you so much for your time today. I'm gonna go ahead to the next slide and you can get started.
Thank you. Next slide, for sure. That's my saying there, that I think that we have to talk about effective training, and it should definitely be at the forefront of all of our discussions. We're going to be talking about future, and particularly future for those that are re-entering into society from quite a dehumanizing system. So we'll go to the next slide. And thank you, Vina. Excellent that you gave that presentation. It's not the first time that I've seen you present, and absolutely love what you all do and providing your information. And we'll be having conversations real soon. Appreciate you. I am a training director for an organization that is now celebrating their 50 years of service. They were established in 1973. And it is a community-based organization here in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood of San Francisco. We'll go to the next slide. What we do is we provide a variety of opportunities through our training efforts in a number of sectors. A sector that is near and dear to my heart is the construction and the solar sectors. Back in May of 2010, I was highlighting in a magazine article where they were interviewing individuals that had made career changes. If you all remember the economy back then, it was at the height of a lot of our economy changing. So many people were making career changes. I had been in one way or another associated with the solar industry since about just before the year 2000. And so I decided to make a career change, and I began to work right in the solar industry. And at that time, what I wanted to do was come to inner cities and challenge and train individuals in the cities that were either displaced or looking for other opportunities. And I knew that solar would be one of those areas for folks to look into. In the next slide, I want to highlight, it's no coincidence that both Vina and I are talking about the rate of incarceration. The rise of mass incarceration has affected our communities in so many ways, disproportionately, I might add. And if we were to look at this graph now, you'd see a little bit of a downturn, just a very, very little bit, but it's still a high rise. And I like to say that the rise wasn't by accident, and we can save that discussion for another topic, but those of you all that are out there and are contractors, and I myself am a contractor, this is no small point to overlook when we start talking about incarceration. And in the next slide, I am proposing the idea of individuals going from prisons to panels. It's an excellent opportunity for the individuals that I work with and that many of you all will encounter that have been incarcerated in a system that is quite dehumanizing. For you to give an opportunity, a second chance, if you will, to individuals like that, not only through not only being in compliance with fair chance hiring. The reason why it's important is in our next slide, because it represents a pathway to freedom. And I mean that in every sense of the word. In these pictures actually are individuals that were part of the system at one point and now are in the industries. And they've all expressed to me that really, Dr. Smith, wow, this is really like my pathway to freedom. You know, they've each said it individually at some point, so much to a point that I now recognize that for many people, making that step from a very dehumanizing situation to join humanity. And one of the ways is, of course, to have a viable job. I'm happy to be a part of that process. And Young Community Developers is a job training organization that strongly believes in providing opportunities for those that are system impacted by the justice system, both by the juvenile justice system, by the adult justice system, to provide them with an opportunity to be on this pathway to freedom. And I've identified alternative energy, particularly solar energy, and solar as a way out. Next slide. Contractors, what should you really be considering when you think about hiring from this reentry population? I've listed here several important reasons. First of all, it's social impact, and it's a positive social impact, because quite frankly, hiring individuals from this population, this reentry population, can definitely have a positive impact on society in general. Offering this second chance and providing opportunities for successful reintegration into the community does something for an individual that has been in a dehumanizing period of time in their life. The second reason that I list here is that many individuals in the reentry population have developed very, very valuable skills and have experiences that they've gained. And some of them had these experiences before incarceration, and some of them have developed very important skills during incarceration as well. And so providing a workforce that is skilled, I look for, when I'm hiring, skilled individuals and individuals that come from a diverse background. A lot of the individuals that are re-entering society, coming out straight from prison or jail, have received actually very good vocational training. And they've acquired quite a bit of expertise. And those areas, you know, I've listed them here in construction and plumbing and electrical work and of course, other trade skills. And then finally, the dedication and loyalty should always be considered. An individual coming out of jail or prison that is starting their life again is going to be loyal and dedicated because they've experienced incarceration and they understand the value of employment. And as a result, they're going to demonstrate a strong work ethic, the dedication, and the loyalty. These are just a few reasons why I do the work that I do. And I've been doing this work for quite a number of years. And as a matter of fact, I've retired, and this is my encore career. And I probably won't ever retire and just sit around holding my hands because I realize that there is work to be done. I am very passionate about the fair chance hiring opportunities that exist. In another field, I was involved with, I was part of the Nickelby, you know, remember the No Child Left Behind? And so I've kind of coined that phrase now, no inmate left behind. No one that's re-entering society again should not have an opportunity to have a better chance, a second chance. Next slide. And so I want to thank you, and I want to encourage you, if you are in the position of hiring an individual, that you begin to look at this population and you begin to look at those that have, quite frankly, done what most of us have done, made a mistake, a choice that unfortunately landed them in jail or in prison. But I want you to think about this. I want you to think about giving that individual another chance. And that is what fair chance hiring is all about. I thank you.
We appreciate you, Dr. Smith. From prison to panels, if you're saying that kind of stuff in retirement, I can only imagine the anecdotes you're going to give us later on. We appreciate you so much here at SOMAH, and thank you so much for this presentation. Next slide, Ingrid. All right, our last panelist of the day, Ms. Wanda Rogers. She is the founder of the SoCal Pre-Apprenticeship Program, also the principal owner of Construction Service Workers, founded in April 2009, as the only African-American woman to own a construction staffing agency in the country. Her new endeavor now is SoCal Pre-Apprenticeship Program. It is a collaboration with San Diego City College. This is the first collaboration working to assist individuals with job readiness in the transportation arena. She's one of the few women minority-owned, underutilized, disadvantaged business enterprises in the state of California. I am saying that correctly, y'all, in the state of California. Without further ado, Ms. Wanda Rogers, thank you so much for your time, and we can go to the next slide and you can go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you and speak today. Dr. Smith, great job. And we do need to talk about a partnership. I didn't forget you. It's just, you know, with everything that's going on, it would be great. You know, it's interesting, some of the things that Dr. Smith talked about and Vina. Well, actually, I now go into the state prisons. I was invited by RJ Donovan here in San Diego to come in and talk to justice involved about the program. This program was created out of my disparities of chasing contracts, right? And so as you chase contracts and you're a queen, because I am a queen, African-American woman, and I stand in my purpose, and I have no qualms about telling you what the truth is. And so as I go in and I speak to the inmates, and they're real excited about what you have an opportunity that I can transition out and I can actually earn prevailing wage. That's a game changer. Absolutely. Here's an opportunity for you to really say, listen, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be purposeful in everything that I do as I transition out of prison. But as I told them yesterday when I went into the state prison, I can't do the work for you. You have to be committed. And so the young men, they understood where I was. And so I really made sure they knew, listen, you come to my program and you play around, I'm going to kick you out. That's how serious I am. I've had over 100 people apply for my program since 2019, and we've only graduated 22. So that should tell you a lot about where I am and how I move. I'm very strategic. I'm not interested in dealing. I understand everyone has issues and they need some compassion, but I can't lead you if you're not ready to be led. Next slide. So this is me actually in RJ Donovan when I was first invited. And so our 16-week pre-apprenticeship program, we teach soft skills training. A lot of people, even those that are not inmates, they forget about being on time. They forget what it looks like. Don't take your shoes off at your new employer. This is not your house. Right? They forget sometimes how to communicate. What is it to fill out a resume? As we navigate these waters here in San Diego, we're a part of the reentry roundtable. And so we signed on to a lot of bills that come out to help secure, for instance, they're now using tablets in state prison now. Everyone is assigned a tablet because we had to fight for the right to say, listen, as they're coming out, they need some type of skill knowledge when it comes to technology. That's a huge barrier. How do we reduce barriers? We also signed on to a bill for them to receive their state ID or their driver's license before they come out of prison. It is tough for them to be released onto the streets at 3 a.m. in the morning, and then they're stopped by the police and they have no identification. Or if they fill out an application or they need their Social Security card, they can't obtain their Social Security card, which is required when you receive a check, any form of a check, or if you receive that job from the employer. These documents are requested because of I-9 federal regulations once again. So we teach them about all of the different tools and resources that they would need in our 16-week program. If I could just tell you this, when I first started out, we went through the community college district. Our program has been recognized by the DIR, the way it's been set up and structured, because we offer case management. We make sure that once that person graduates from our program, we can seamlessly move them through to a career or to an apprenticeship program. However, the barriers that come along with that, as you're trying to introduce someone to something that is out of their element, right? You want them to go through a curriculum. What does that, well, I can't get there, transportation is too much. So what we had to do as SoCal is we had to go the community route. We needed to ensure that we had various organizations partnering with us that offer mental health. It's a reality. Mental health is a reality. If I can't get you to show up for a class, what makes me think if you're rebounding back, let me use Vina's business name, you're rebounding back in your mind, you don't have the mental stability to move forward, then what makes me think you'll attend our course? Right. So when we think about academics and skill training and all of these just minimum requirements, they become barriers for most of our justice involved population. However, they get real excited when I speak to them and I say, listen, you have an opportunity as a laborer picking up trash to earn $62 an hour. I must pay that to you as an employer on any kind of prevailing wage job that has federal or state money attached. And they were like, whoa, wait a minute, what? So with that, it's just really, we have to really think about wraparound services and how critical they are to the needs of our justice involved. Next slide, and I believe this is the last slide. I don't want to continue to pontificate here. And so we're excited about partnerships. As I said, the diverse talent pipeline, the skilled workers. Now, skilled workers, believe it or not, are required on any public agency project. They want to know if they are part of an apprenticeship program or pre-apprenticeship if they're registered with the DIR. And that is a huge component that we can offer as a pre-apprenticeship program because we are registered with the DIR. So once they graduate with us, they receive a certificate from the DIR that says that they went through our pre-apprenticeship program, which would allow that to transfer over into an apprenticeship program later in life if they chose. They also earn $250 from us at the end when they graduate the program. I put on a big to-do because it is a big to-do. You've accomplished something, you unlocked your mind. You were ready to move forward. So we work with parole, probation. The DA is our major partner here in San Diego. And so we work with all of these different entities. We now have a homeless court. And one of the people I referred over to the homeless court, he had a DUI. His fines were upward of $50,000. Do you understand that they wiped away every piece that he owned? That's a huge opportunity for justice involved. The expungement clinics that Vina spoke about with Root and Rebound is huge. I'm grateful to know as I go back in and I speak to the individuals, I was telling them up to 10 years. However, now it's wonderful to know 7 years, but there is a 10-year limit when you talk about the airport TSA. they go back 10 years because we're talking federal government. It's wonderful to understand and know that the opportunities that we can give to justice involved, letting them know there are some organizations out here like Dr. Smith, like Vina's organization, and to the contractors that are on here, you know, providing opportunities to justice involved. You also can receive from workforce, I'm not sure if you know about this, that if you hire someone with a background, they will give you insurance bond, I believe it's up to $25,000. So if something comes up missing or something is missing, whatever, they will ensure that they'll reimburse you up to $25,000. That's a free service. There's also another service that they offer. If you hire justice involved, you can receive OJT money, on the job training. I mean, there are so many ways between these three organizations for when you talk about SOMAH, how we can really collaborate and come together to help change the narrative of our justice involved population. And I'm going to say this, and then I'll stop pontificating. I really appreciate our governor. Governor Newsom shut down every juvenile detention facility. I had a conversation, I had the privilege of speaking with probation, and probation said your program is right on. We need a way to help move our justice involved individuals through a seamless program. But it's not just me. It takes a village, as Dr. Smith has said early on. It takes all of us working together and understanding what that looks like. And with the help of Rebound, Vina, and all the pieces, the tools. Oh my God, I'm gonna hit your website for them toolkits. Come on, somebody. There is no learning that you can't stop doing. It's just a great way for us all to come together. Again, thank you so much for having me here and giving me the ability to speak about SoCal pre-apprenticeship program.
We appreciate you so much, Ms. Wanda Rogers. You are great and powerful, and we appreciate your wisdom and the onward looking thoughts and your ability to just collaborate with the other panelists here today. It's endearing, and it also teaches me a bit about continuing to build communities and ecosystems. We definitely don't want to take too much of the audience's time and the panelists' time, so we're going to limit our Q&A to just 5 minutes, and we'll be just asking our panelists one question each. And so we can go ahead to the next slide, please. This is a little tough because we have some absolute rock stars as panelists, and so to ask one question each is going to be very tough. So I think I've got it down. So we're going to start with Vina, if that's okay. So Vina, you spoke about $87 billion being lost in GDP as a result of not hiring workers with conviction histories. Here at SOMAH, we deal a lot with contractors who need to meet these SOMAH job training requirements. And these kinds of estimates and figures can encourage them to look much more deeply at system impacted folks. I'm curious, in your opinion, do you think, this $87 billion, is it a result of lost productivity? What's your inclination? How would you encourage our contractors to look at system impacted folks and consider them when hiring?
Yeah, oftentimes I feel that system impacted employees are, they have, I don't know what the right word is, but they're go-getters, they're really motivated. They're loyal employees. They want to be there on the job. And so I think that they just need a chance to prove themselves, and they're really looking for that chance. And so I just would encourage employers that if they meet the rest of the requirements, if they have the qualifications, don't let something in the background, stop you from believing in that employee, because they will generate you've entrusted in them, they'll entrust in you. And so that's, that you can make up for it in strides. And then there are also government incentives that I didn't talk about in there. There's bonding insurance and things like that. And so I would encourage employers to look into that as well.
We appreciate the thoughtfulness behind that answer. And for any contractors in the call, y'all are getting some actual physical resources that y'all can apply to. So please apply to them. It's not every day we get a collection of people this smart on one place. For Dr. Smith, you spoke a little bit about several reasons for hiring reentry candidates. One of them was loyalty and dedication. I mean, just based on your Hall of Fame career, to be blunt, can you speak to your experience with why you think loyalty and dedication is a big part of why reentry candidates are a reason to be looked at? Why do they dedicate themselves so much to a project, to learning, and to like any job opportunity when given the chance?
Yes, I'll speak to that. And I want to say, first of all, emotional intelligence. When you think about emotional intelligence, I want you to think about, I want you to think about how we interact with people in general. We throw around sometimes terms. These people that have been either in jail or in prison have been called names that are dehumanizing. I don't call them out of their name, and I don't call them dehumanizing names. Someone that is coming out of prison and or jail is highly motivated not to go back into where I came from. For so many months, for so many years, in a lot of cases, the individuals that I have dealt with need that second chance or that chance. Sometimes a third or fourth chance, but it's a chance. The motivation alone is what makes them loyal and dedicated once given the opportunity. And it's the opportunity that I am highlighting that we should, as contractors, afford them. It's the opportunity alone. And it's a two-way street. My mindset must change as their mindset changes and evolves. But my mindset must change as well. I hope that answered the question. Motivation. In one word, motivation.
You definitely did, Dr. Smith, and we appreciate your experience and thoughtfulness behind the answer. That was amazing to hear. Just really quickly, Anthony mentioned that he's the senior program coordinator for the Green Path Careers and offers training in solar. He's looking to connect with contractors that will help hire system impacted folks. So Anthony, shout out to you. We'll definitely connect and put some of those resources out there. We have a question from Christine and Ms. Wanda Rogers. I think you'd be amazing to answer this. Christine asks, what are some tips for helping other leaders see the value with these programs? It is difficult to get past personal biases sometimes.
Well, I think first you need to have some empathy, because it could be you behind bars. It could be you in trouble. And what would you want someone to have with you? Empathy and compassion. And if you don't have that, I think you're in the wrong line. Anyone that doesn't have that, they're in the wrong industry. This is a service industry. We're here to help others. It's not about you. It's not about what you want at the end of the day. It's more about how do we, I apologize, my light goes off and on in my office. It's more about how do we ensure that we can move those individuals that have the systemic racism that has gone on for over 450 years. right, with certain populations and certain class of people. If you're willing to change it, it's real easy. Have some empathy and compassion.
Thank you so much for that response, Ms. Rogers. And Christine, thank you so much for that thoughtful question. I think it was a very important question, and I'm glad you were able to ask it. I feel like I could sit here all day with y'all, but unfortunately, we need y'all out in the world so that you can continue doing the good work that y'all are doing. So I appreciate y'all's time. I just want to end with this. Isaac Newton once said, you know, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So we appreciate you allowing us to stand on your shoulders and continue to learn. Hopefully the workforce team and the wider SOMAH PA can continue doing the work we do to working with these folks. And lastly, and just on the topic of fair chance hiring, I hope that either all of us or none of us are judged by the actions of our weakest moments, but rather by the strength we show when and if we're given a second chance. Thank you all so much to the panelists. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much to Ingrid for working on the slides and helping me with this webinar. It is a very tough job, and I appreciate your leadership. Mina, thank you so much for helping me with questions. And for everybody in the audience that was able to attend, I appreciate you all for making some time for this today. This was a lovely webinar, and hopefully we encourage some people to look at this population a little bit more closely.